now we've got all these controls in place. We've implemented all this great stuff. But the regulation says something like this: regularly test and monitor your controls effectiveness. As a dealership owner, and I'm worried about moving cars and staying profitable and finding talent to work and all these kinds of things, what does this really mean to me, and how do I solve for it?
Yeah, so validation of controls is critical to every assessment if you want it to be effective. So what generally happens is that there are some, I guess, generic sort of tests that everybody does: pen tests, vulnerability scans, things to validate. What an assessor like myself looks at is I'll look at every control and I'll try to come up with a way to test it and validate that it's effective. So say you had controls to prevent spam from coming in your email, so to prevent phishing. Well, we might try to get some phishing emails through and see if we get phishing emails through, what do people do? That's one example. A pen test is another good example, where you hire someone to basically say, okay, we think we have really good external perimeter controls, try to get in, that kind of thing.
Right.
So
okay, so this is just okay. I built the fort. I built the fortress. Let's see how the bad guys could potentially interact with it, and let's make sure that these things are actually, like, the fire alarm actually works when I go to pull it, or my carbon monoxide sensor actually beeps at 2 a.m. if I have a gas leak or whatever. And so what we're looking to do here is validate that the controls you applied at your dealership or check cashing entity in step 3 actually work. Tom, one more question and stop here. There's a call out for a vulnerability assessment every 6 months. Do I have to buy a tool to do that? Do I have to procure software? How do I do a vulnerability assessment every 6 months?
Yeah, so there's multiple ways. You can buy a tool and run it yourself. That's one option. Again, you'd have to have someone skilled enough to know what they're doing to make it work properly. You can purchase a service that does that for you. Now, vulnerability management is a tricky thing because we have an external vulnerability. That means things that are facing the internet, but we also have internal vulnerabilities. So we need to make sure that we're doing this both internally and externally. Now, people say, well, I've got a firewall, I don't need to do internal. Well, you're assuming that that firewall is going to be 100% effective all the time. What we want to know is what happens if they penetrate the perimeter. Because as we just talked about, so someone sends one of your users an email that has a remote access control link in it that they don't know about, they click on it. Now the threat actor has access to that machine. Now what can they do inside because our wall didn't work?
Got it.
Okay. Kind of think of it as a bank, right? They don't leave the money, they don't lock the outside door, leave the money laying all over, right? They will put it in a safe, and then,
And I with one of the last of these little educational insights we did, we talked about the strike zone, right? And the strike zone for, it's very, very large, and dealers can't hit every pitch, right? But what's important is that we know when a pitch gets by, right? And that's really the key here, is making sure that you're testing these things and that you're scanning to put yourself in a position where you can certainly play offense more than defense. So, well, great. Well, now we've talked about validating controls. The explanation was spot on. I was just curious into, after I apply them, obviously they should work, but it's always good to check that plan and make sure your safeguards are as effective as you think.